Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. So today I'm going to be sharing with you all of the spooky books that I read in October. I read a total of 14 books in October. I feel very like businessy in this shirt, like I'm ready to take the corporate world by storm. Also, we're gonna pour my Dr. Pepper into this mason jar to make it more aesthetic, right? Because that's what we're about here on this channel. Let's just jump into it. The first book that I read in October was Strange Grace by Tessa Gratton, and I gave this book 5 stars. I really loved it. This is a standalone fantasy book that takes place in a village called Three Graces, and basically the legend goes that many years ago a Grace witch made a pact with the devil, and so now every 7 years on the Slaughter Moon, the citizens of Three Graces must send their best boy into the forest to be sacrificed to the devil so that for the next 7 years they will have prosperity and good luck and nothing bad will happen in this village. And so they've been doing this for a very long time, and at the beginning of this book the Slaughter Moon comes like 3 years early and the forest is requesting another boy to be sacrificed. And so this book follows 3 main characters. The first one is Merwin, who is the daughter of the current Grace Witch, and her father was a previous best boy who was sacrificed into the forest before she was born. The second main character is Arthur, whose mother raised him to be a girl so that he would never be sacrificed to the forest, and then when he was 7 he discovered that he wasn't a girl, so now he's kind of on a quest to prove that he is the best boy in this village. And then the third and final main character is Reen, who is actually this year's current best boy. I just loved this so much. These 3 main characters are in a polyamorous relationship with each other. Loki? Hang on. Sorry, he was scratching at my door. So he's joining me for this wrap up. Basically what I was saying was that they're in a polyamorous relationship with each other, and it's just so great. I really loved this book. The characters were amazing, and not only that, but the setting was so cool. The Devil's Forest really came to life and felt like another character within this world. Oh my god, I just loved it so much, and the writing was beautiful. I will now read everything that Tessa Gratton writes because it was just incredible. I highly recommend it if you're looking for a good standalone fantasy. Next, I read Small Spaces by Catherine Arden, and this is a middle grade book that follows a girl named Ollie whose mother recently died. She's been grieving that, and one day she sees this woman about to throw a book into the lake, and she, being an avid book lover, immediately goes and saves the book, takes it home that night, and reads it. And then the next day she is on a school trip to a farm, and she starts to see a lot of things in the book that she's reading are actually real. Like, she sees the graves of the people in the book. A lot of spooky things start to happen to her. I really enjoyed this. I think I gave it like 3.5 stars. I obviously am not like the audience for this book. I feel like this is definitely more on the lower end of the middle grade spectrum. This would probably be great for kids like 9, 10. I don't really know what middle grade ages are, but it definitely read like a younger middle grade when I compare it to other middle grades that I've read, but it was still enjoyable, and I think it was a fun, spooky Halloween book that isn't gonna be super scary. Next, I read Lost Sisters by Holly Black, and this is the novella that bridges the gap in between The Cruel Prince and The Wicked King, and it's basically told as a letter from Taryn to Jude explaining her side of the events in The Cruel Prince, and I really liked this. I think I'm just gonna like anything that it takes place in this world. I definitely hate Taryn, and I still hate her after reading this novella, but it was interesting to hear her kind of justify things and also find out a little bit more of Locke's motivations, because he's a very sneaky, secretive character. So I definitely liked learning more about him, and the writing in this was just incredible. There were so many lines that I was highlighting. I just think Holly Black is such a great writer, and I cannot wait for The Wicked King. The next book that I read was Contagion by Erin Bowman, and I actually ended up DNFing this book. This was a sci-fi thriller basically about a search and rescue crew who gets a 911 from the crew on a nearby planet, so they go to see what happened and everyone is dead. Yeah, I don't know. I just wasn't enjoying this. I got excited at the beginning because I thought there might be a female-female relationship, but then one of those characters, of course, died. So that didn't happen, and I wasn't enjoying it. I didn't really care about any of the characters. It felt like a plot that I had seen a million movies of. Like, if you've seen any of the Alien movies, then you've read this book pretty much. And those movies are a lot more compelling and have better characters. So I just didn't feel the need to finish it. The next book that I read was... Can you not interrupt me? The next book that I read was Vengeful by V.E. Schwab. This is the sequel to Vicious, and I gave this 5 stars. I loved it so much. It was everything that I wanted out of a sequel. I'm not going to talk too much about this, obviously, because I can't really say much without spoiling stuff, but my favorite aspects of this book were the backstory that we got on Eli's character, because in Vicious we don't really learn anything about him, and so this book really kind of helps explore his character and why he does the things that he does. Also, there were 2 new characters introduced in this book that I absolutely loved. They're both women who just have incredibly badass powers, and I would die if she wrote a spin-off following one of those characters. I kind of got the feeling that that might happen based on the ending. I will give all my money for that. So yeah, really loved that. Next, I read Escaping from Houdini by Carrie Maniscalco. I did like pretty much a full review of this book that is very spoilery, so if you want to go watch that, I will link it up above. It's towards the end of one of my vlogs, but I gave this book 1 star. I really did not like it. So I'll just quickly go over the reasons why I didn't like it. One is that I felt like this book did nothing to progress the series forward. The characters pretty much ended the book in the same exact place that they started, which just made all the annoying things that happened throughout the book absolutely pointless. There was an unnecessary love triangle that was added, which I'm actually a really big fan of love triangles. I'm a super big supporter of people having options and exploring those options, but where I think love triangles crosses the line into no longer being enjoyable for me is when there's already a solidified couple and then a new person enters in, and then there's cheating, which I don't like. I hate cheating. I think it's one of the most like selfish things you can do, and there's never an excuse for me for it. Yeah, also the main character was just incredibly annoying, and she really gaslighted Thomas and treated him super poorly. So this was a romance that I loved, and now I just... What? And now... Can you not bark, please? See, he hates this book too. Are you done? Apparently he has more to say about this. Yep. I don't know if I'm gonna continue with this series. I'm not excited about it at all. But yeah, like I said, if you want to know like my in-depth spoilery thoughts, you can go watch that video. It's probably like one of my favorite reviews I've ever done. Next, I read The Dark Descent of Elizabeth Frankenstein by Kirsten White, and this was obviously a Frankenstein retelling about a girl named Elizabeth who gets taken out of a bad family situation and ends up living with the Frankenstein family to be a companion for their son Victor. And I think ultimately I was just really disappointed by this book. The pacing was just all over the place. It was like agonizingly slow at some points and then way too fast at other points. I really love slow books, so the fact that it was slow isn't a negative to me. Pretty much all my favorite books are considered slow books, but this was just so slow. I was so bored. I even mentioned in my vlog that I fell asleep while reading this, which I don't think I've ever fallen asleep while reading a book before in my life. The reason why I got 3 stars and not like 2 is that I really loved Elizabeth as a character. She was probably one of my favorite main characters. Unfortunately, I just did not like the book that she was in. She's definitely like a Slytherin queen, which Slytherins pretty much tend to be my favorite characters. But yeah, unfortunately this book was just like disappointing. And then, speaking of disappointing books, I read the Boneless Mercies by April Genevieve Tuholke. This was pitched as a gender-bent Beowulf retelling, which I don't really think this was. Pretty much this book kind of read like more like an outline or a rough draft than an actual finished book. I think it needed to be so much longer than it was. It's a standalone fantasy that is just barely above 300 pages, which is not nearly long enough to flesh out this world and do any world building, which was pretty much my main problem, is that the world building was really bad. It was so much more telling versus showing. I feel like we were told a lot about the world and not actually shown things, and it ended up putting up kind of a wall and a distance between me and the story. I didn't feel like I was fully immersed in it. I also just didn't connect to any of the characters. I didn't really care about any of them. The plot just felt super scattered. I don't know what this was. It was weird. I didn't like it. Next, I read Sadie by Courtney Summers, and this is a young adult mystery thriller. I think it's more mystery. And I gave this 4 stars. I really liked this, and I'm kind of surprised that I did because it's not the type of book I would normally pick up. But the hype totally got me. Everyone was talking about this book and loving it. It basically follows a girl named Sadie who's, prior to the book, her younger sister was murdered, and she knows who killed her sister, so she goes on a quest to get revenge and kill the person who killed her sister. And the book switches back and forth between her narrative, and then also there is a guy who is doing a podcast trying to find Sadie because she's gone missing. It's really interesting because when we're following her narrative, and then the next chapter is the podcast where he is interviewing the people that she crosses paths with. So yeah, it was really great. I listened to it on audio, which I would highly recommend. It's one of the best produced audiobooks I've ever listened to. It's a full cast, and it actually feels like you're listening to a podcast, which is really cool. There's like music and sound effects, and yeah, it's just really great. I really enjoyed it. The next book that I read was The Sisters of the Winterwood by Rena Rossner, and I gave this book 5 stars. It was incredible. It is a standalone fantasy that is a retelling of Goblin Market. It follows 2 sisters who discover that one of them can turn into a swan and the other one can turn into a bear, and the story is really just about them discovering who they are, and they both meet different boys and kind of have sexual awakenings. There's also a lot of Jewish culture in here, which I really enjoyed. I haven't read a lot of books with Jewish main characters, but of the handful that I have read, I think that this really showcased the culture a lot, and that was really kind of like the forefront of the book. It really was about these 2 sisters and their bond with each other. I really enjoyed the way that it was written. It's told from each of the sisters' points of views, and one of their point of views is told in verse, which I actually really enjoyed, and I thought it really helped connect the book to the original poem, and it was just really beautiful. I loved it. One of my favorites of the year. 5 stars. Next, I read The Dreadful Tale of Prosper Redding by Alexandra Bracken. This is a middle grade about a boy named Prosper who discovers that many years ago his great-great-great-grandfather made a deal with a demon and ended up breaking that contract, and now the demon is back to get revenge, and the demon is living inside his mind. I really enjoyed this. It was a lot of fun. It takes place in Salem, Massachusetts, which is a town that I'm very familiar with. I used to live really close to there, and I would visit all the time, so it was a lot of fun reading a book that took place there. My favorite parts of the book were definitely like the inner monologues of the demon inside Prosper's head. The demon was really funny, and the bickering that they would do inside his head was just like the highlight of this book. They had a really interesting relationship. This was my first Alexandra Bracken book, and I definitely am impressed. I think I ended up giving this 4 stars. This was definitely like a really great October Halloween read. There's a bunch of magical creatures in it. There's like goblins and elves and demons, obviously, and witches, and it was just a whole lot of fun. Next, I read The Wicked Deep by Shay Earnshaw, and I ended up giving this 3.5 stars. This book takes place in a seaside town, and basically centuries ago in this town, 3 sisters were executed because the villagers thought that they were witches. Now, every summer, they return and take the bodies of 3 girls in town and lure men into the water and kill them. The book follows a main character who has lived in this town her whole life. I definitely have mixed emotions about this book. I think for the first half of the book, I was really bored. I wasn't enjoying it, and then a couple plot twists happened, which I did predict. But once the plot twists happened, I enjoyed it a lot more. So I really liked the second half of the book, but I didn't like the first half, and I was super tempted to DNF it. I don't know. I didn't really find the main character all that compelling for the first half of the book. I'm really trying not to spoil anything. I didn't really like the romance at all. I didn't see any reason why the two characters liked each other. They didn't have anything in common, and it was really insta-lovey. Yeah, I don't know. The book was good, not great. I think a lot of people might like this, especially if you are someone who doesn't really like fantasy, but you want something that has a little bit of those magical elements to it. I think another reason why I didn't like this is I was expecting it to be a lot more witchy than it was, and it really wasn't. It definitely is a contemporary with just like a tiny bit of magic, and it wasn't enough for me. Y'all know I'm a super fantasy magic lover, and it just wasn't what I was expecting it to be. Next, I read Not Even Bones by Rebecca Schaeffer, and oh my god, I loved this book so much. Basically, this follows a girl whose mother is like a supernatural hunter, and she kills supernatural beings and then brings them home for her to dissect, and then they sell them on the black market until one day she is betrayed and she ends up getting sold on the black market. This book was just so unique and unlike any other young adult book I've ever read. I really loved the main character. She is without a doubt a villain. She's not an anti-hero. She's not morally gray. She's just a straight up villain. Like, she's a bad person and I loved it. I also really loved the main male character. They had a really great dynamic with each other and amazing banter. I totally ship them. I also loved the romance in this book because there is none, which is how I think romance in first books should be. It should be more of like a hint of something to come, but nothing really romantic happened in this book. You can just tell it's headed in that direction, and that's how I like it. I've read way too many young adult books this year where the characters are just in love on page 10, and I'm so sick of it. So it was really refreshing to read something that has a really good slow burn romance. I really loved it. I cannot wait for the next one. The only reason this isn't getting 5 stars is because the plot was a little bit repetitive. At times it was kind of stagnant, but everything else was just so amazing that it didn't really bother me that much. And then the last book that I read in October was Toil and Trouble, which is an anthology with 15 witchy stories, and I think I'm gonna end up giving this 3 stars. I don't know. I feel like I just need to admit that I don't like anthologies. I always think that I do, and then I read them, and I don't think I've ever rated an anthology more than 3 stars. I just always end up only liking 1 or 2 stories, and then the rest are like, not so great. It was just okay. So those were all of the books that I read in October. Let me know if you read any of these and what you thought of them. Thank you guys for watching, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!